All right. It says that we are live. Welcome, welcome. I'm Dr. Sandra, and it is a pleasure to have you back here with me talking about burnout hiding in plain sight. And today, we're actually going to talk about part one of a series I'm calling What's a Burnout? What's on the Other Side? Why? Because so many times burnout feels so impossible that people don't think there is another side, right? They feel like this is it, this is the end of it for me. And one of the primary symptoms of burnout is exhaustion. In fact, exhaustion of every kind, like the the WHO definition highlights the physical and emotional exhaustion, but also there's a mental exhaustion. Like you, sometimes you just can't think straight, and even this disconnection, which would be what some of us might call a spiritual exhaustion, where you just don't feel like anything is sparking you anymore. It actually feels there's a kind of an emptiness that you feel. You don't feel connected to anything anymore. So the exhaustion is pretty pervasive. And I wanted to do this series to get people to start thinking about, well, how could there be another side to burnout, right? So I'm going to go through some of the symptoms in this series and just talk a little bit about how we can get to the other side. I like to keep these discussions to about 10 minutes or so. Sometimes I'm using StreamYard and sometimes it will not allow me to see your comments. But if it doesn't allow me to see the comments on StreamYard, I will definitely check my other feeds to make sure that I reply to whatever questions or thoughts you had. So let's just talk about what this exhaustion looks like, right? You, I mentioned that it's all kinds of exhaustion. It's the physical part, it's the emotional, the mental, even spiritual exhaustion. I would say one of the most common things that you might notice when you are in that level of burnout, exhaustion, is that sometimes you are wired and tired. And so you try to go to sleep, but you can't. And then when you do go to sleep, you wake up still feeling exhausted. There's no replenishing. Your sleep doesn't bring you any replenishing. You might also find yourself moving through the day looking for things to give you a boost. Maybe I need another coffee. Maybe I need this, right? You find yourself kind of dragging through your day. And I would say there's the phrase I like to use is that you feel like you're taking twice as long to do half as much. Like there's not any of your oomph anymore. And the things that even used to spark you might not spark you, right? Like, so, you might get excited about meeting with a colleague about a project or something. And now you're feeling this level of exhaustion that you don't even get excited. Now you can do the thing, right? You go and you do it, but there's no real sense that anything is happening. Anything is feeling like, yeah, I want to do this, right? I'm curious about it. I'm wondering about it. I'm thinking there's possibility for me in this. So those are just a few clues. But one of the things I like to encourage people to do, right, if we're going to start talking about how we move through this, is to do a little audit, right? Just a little energy audit where you say, what brought me sparks? You look at your day before and you look at what brought you sparks, right? We have to kind of know how we get in the exhaustion pattern if we're going to get out of it. So you look for what brought you sparks, what took you up and what took you down, as a way of just noticing the things that either seem to bring you some energy or things that seem to deplete you. So that's one of the ways to start to know what are the patterns in your life where there might be a way you could cut your energy expense. Because you can get unexhausted by just cutting out some things, right? You can start to reclaim your energy by like, okay, this thing, picking up the dry cleaning. No, you know what? The dry cleaners deliver. So I'm just going to have them deliver, right? So it could be that. It could be as simple as I do this audit and you recognize there are these things that are depleting you. And you might be able to give those things away. So that's one way to start looking at what it is that's getting you into this pattern of just feeling so exhausted. It could be that there are excessive demands in your workplace or it's just in your life in general. So, for example, you have your family, and you may not just have your children or, your partner at home. You might also have relatives in other places that you're managing, you're helping. And so you have lots of responsibilities. You may have community responsibilities. So there may be places where you can just cut your expense and say, okay, I'm a part of this, but I actually feel like I can turn this over to this person, and that will help me to cut my expense. So that's just a small way to begin to think about how do you see how you're in the pattern, and then how you might cut your expense. Another pattern I think that's important to look at is how we get to this place of thinking that pushing ourselves is the only way, right? So you just have to keep pushing. You have to keep pushing. Now that can come from some family history, some social cultural norms. I would actually call them social norms rather than cultural, because when I think of culture, I think of things that cultivate us, things that nurture us. So we often get into these patterns, a social pattern that is accepted, it's a norm, but it's not necessarily nurturing us. So let's think about the ways that we can get in a pattern. Some of that might just be the way you observe people around you. When you were growing up, you might have just seen that this is just how people work. This is how people run their lives. They push and push and push until they're just exhausted, and everybody's sitting around watching television. But several people have now fallen asleep because they're so exhausted they can't keep their eyes on whatever we might be watching as a family, right? It could be that. It might also be in your profession. There are certain kinds of things that are just expected. The 80-hour week might be an expectation. One of the most striking stories that I encountered listening to people talk about the demands of their work was a woman who was a C-suite executive, and she worked for a company that had as one of their products mattresses. And she talked about these long hours and how she will do the work, she will give what she has to give. So she was dedicated, right? There was this clear dedication. But when I listened to her, I thought, wow, so like there's no room in this for you to hear your own body when your body says rest. Yet one of your main products is this mattress that's supposed to help people get to their deepest rest. Deep rest is essential. Deep rest is where we start to feel, right? Our bodies actually do their healing work, right? We renew, we recharge. We need deep rest. So look for the patterns that might just be in your profession. Or it could be something that you developed as a pattern because of your own life experience. Something occurred and something says to you, you have to push. Or you could be in an organization where everybody pushes. And if you're not the one, if you don't look like you're doing the push that everybody else does, you may feel like, oh, there's not going to be any opportunity for me to advance. So you have to adopt this way of being in order to advance. So think about the patterns that might be holding you in this, I have to push until I'm exhausted. And then look for ways you can shift those patterns. Um, Family patterns, you may be the first in your family who starts to shift, right? In your workplace, there may be ways to talk to your management and talk about your work style and how you may be getting equally as much done as the people who push and push and push. But your work style may be very different. You may get there in a different way. So you may have conversations with people in your environment, in your management environment, so that they actually see, wow, this person is quite productive and they're well, right? So that's another thing to help you do this little audit. And then the second thing I would say, if we're talking about how we're going to move out of this exhaustion, is, well, we're going to make resting and recharging a part of the way we live. And right, so it's totally right. Like if one side of the work equation is we're going to push and push and push, then the other side is that, okay, we're going to give and take, right? We're going to actually slow down a little bit. So there are going to be times when we actually slow down. So one of the easiest ways to start to bring energy back is to just notice and use your own breath. Breath, in the meditation technique that I studied, my mentor taught us that breath, right? Prana, vital energy, rides the breath. So it's a matter of you trusting that breath, that energy is available to you. So you can simply do something like stop 3 times a day for 3 minutes and just simply focus on your breath. And whenever your mind wanders, you just bring it back to your breath. Now, this is going to do 2 things. One is, again, prana-rise the breath. So you're going to start to feel some calm and a little bit more of a release and a settling. And you're also going to start to reconnect with your body, because when we are exhausted, we actually don't listen to our bodies anymore. In fact, we feel like the exhaustion sometimes is an annoyance. Why can't I get myself together like this? Why am I so tired? Let me drink some coffee. This is ridiculous. My body needs to do, right? So we get frustrated with ourselves, and then we push a little bit harder. So slowing down, shifting your pattern, right? Slowing down might feel scary to you. However, if you push too hard and you run out of energy and you deplete yourself, your nervous system, your whole body suffers, and then your work absolutely suffers. And not just your work in your job, your career, but in the rest of your life, whatever else is that you call your work in the world. So breath is really important. And like I said, you could take 3 minutes 3 times a day. And you can attach it to things that you naturally do. Now, if you're really in the push mode, you might not also be listening when you need to eat and go to the bathroom. But if you get to that moment where you can't resist, right, anymore, and you got to go to the bathroom, you can also make that a time when you just take 3 extra minutes in the bathroom and do some breath work, right? You can breathe. It's easier to add these things when you attach them to things that you naturally do. You may drive home from work, and when you get to the house, right, and you park your car in the driveway, instead of getting right out of the car, you might sit there and do 3 breaths, right? 3 minutes of breathing. So if you start to just look for those places, right, easing your way into it, finding the places where you can add something that actually brings you a little bit more ability to get to deep rest, then you'll start to ease your way out of exhaustion. And if you're really, really, really exhausted, you may also want the support of a provider, like a functional medicine person, somebody who's a nutritionist, because they can help your body recover. And that's going to be when you're really in deep exhaustion. And even at that place, you can still do breath, right? You can still take 3 minutes. You can take 3 minutes a few times a day and breathe. And then the last thing I want to mention is that rest, make friends with rest, right? This making friends with rest is so important. And I will tell you, my first rest teacher was my grandmother. And you probably heard me talk about her before. We called her Mama Louise. That's because I grew up in Atlanta. And pretty much we call our mama, our grandmama, our everybody's mama, right? So we having a conversation about them. You have to have some way to distinguish them. So my father's mother became Mama Louise. And so Mama Louise, when we woke up in the morning, she would ask us, how did you rest? When we woke up from a nap, she would ask us, how did you rest? And so just feel that question for a moment. How did you rest? This morning, if she'd asked you that, what would you be able to say to her? Did you wake up from your sleep feeling rested? What would you say? She was really committed to rest. We took naps. We sat on the porch together. If there was a thunderstorm, she turned out the lights, and we sat quietly together as the thunderstorm passed through. And every day she did something that brought her joy. These are simple ways that you can rest. And even if you're going through your day, you might be in a meeting. And it might be a meeting that requires lots of activity, lots of mental activity, or even emotional involvement. When you are in that meeting and after that meeting, you can ask yourself, how did I rest in that meeting, right? Where were the places in that meeting that I allowed myself to feel a sense of calm and peace as I navigated whatever you were navigating in the meeting, right? And if you're not in a meeting, at the end of the day, or even checking in with yourself a few times a day, how did I rest? Where was the rest in my day? These are simple steps you can start to take to see that there is really another side to exhaustion. You just have to start getting yourself to see that there's another possibility. The challenge is that we think exhaustion is all that we're going to be able to experience. And the truth is, we can create other experiences. So I'm inviting you to look on the other side of exhaustion and to consider what it looks like for you, what it feels like for you, right? To just allow yourself to remember what it means to be rested, charged, and ready to do what really matters to you. All right. So I'm Dr. Sandra, and I am going to check these different places where this video is going live and see if you have any comments. If there's anything I haven't addressed, I will definitely leave you a comment. All right. Thank you very much. Have a good day.